welcome to week 2 of our beginners gardening sessions. Today we're going to focus on planting seeds and taking cuttings. Now everybody wants to grow their own seeds. There's a great sense of excitement when you see them starting to come through the soil and then you tend to them, and sometimes they just don't work out, and that can be really frustrating because you've gone and you've bought the kit that you need to bring them on in, you've got the compost, you've got the seeds that probably were a little bit pricey, and then they just don't work out. Or maybe you forget about them for a couple of days and they're flat as a pancake and dried out, and that is something that can happen at this time of the year. So there's a few things that we need to focus on just whenever we want to get started into growing our own. So first and foremost, have a think about what type of seeds you would like to bring on, what type of flowers you would like to see in your garden. Do you have a flower bed that you would like to fill? Maybe you would like some ground cover, maybe you would like some brightly coloured flowers, maybe you would like to grow some just to cut to have in a vase in the house. Maybe you'd like some trailing flowers for window boxes. The list is endless. But the one thing that you really need to pay attention to is where they are going to go. So have a think about whether or not they're going to go on a sunny windowsill or a shady windowsill, a shady flower bed, so on and so forth. You get what I'm saying? You need to think about where those flowers are going to grow. If you want to grow petunias and you want them to cover an area in your garden which is mostly shady, that's not going to work out so well because those little plants really thrive in sunshine. So that's your second thing. You got to think about what you want and where you're going to put it. The next stage is, of course, to say, well, okay, that might not work there, so I'll have a look and see what would go there. So you have to do a little bit of searching, especially on the internet now. You can get the answers to those questions. So if you're wondering if petunias will grow well on a sunny windowsill, you can just Google away and say, will petunias grow well on my windowsill? Will this particular plant grow well in a north-facing garden? So on and so forth. So you will start to do that little bit of research and work out what you want, what's going where. And then you need to consider just how hot it is going to be there. And you need to consider whether or not you want to have that much work. If you bring these plants on, you're going to have to water them in the morning and in the late evenings, and there's going to be a little bit more dedication there. But with all young plants, that dedication is still needed. You still need to invest time. But I promise you, if you invest time early on, it will be so much more worth it whenever you have those lovely big plants in your garden, and those plants may come back year in, year out. So lots to think about, but nothing too complicated, nothing that is beyond you. When it comes to actually buying your seeds, do make sure that you buy them and that they are good quality. You don't need to spend the earth, but just make sure that you do get ones that are, you don't need to buy ones that are maybe on the likes of eBay or Amazon for, £10, a normal pack that you can pick up at Tesco or Asda, any supermarkets, or the likes of Homebase and B&Q. They are perfect, and that's exactly what you need to get started. If it was me telling you what to start or suggesting what you should start with, it would definitely be something simple, something that's guaranteed to grow. And these little guys are the best place to start. These are sunflowers, and they grow really, really easily, and they grow rapidly, and they don't need too much care and attention. Obviously enough to keep them going, but you just need to make sure that you look after them. So moving on, we need to talk about how we actually grow our own seeds. So you need to make sure that you buy some decent compost. That's your first point. This is a Miracle-Gro mix, and it has a feed, and it also has little pellets that allow for slow water release, so that keeps it reasonably moist. You might find that some of your compost, especially if you can only pick up some of the cheaper bags, are filled with a lot more pieces of debris within them. And you can pick up one of these, which is a garden sieve, for about £3. So these actually aren't too expensive, but really, really useful. And who knew that sieves existed? I certainly didn't until I found Monty Don using one of them on a Friday night in Gardener's World. And this is such a handy tool, because a lot of the compost is filled with these big bits, which are not good whenever you're trying to plant seeds, because those tiny little bits of growth are trying to push up through that compost. And if there's something like that and you've got this tiny little seed coming up, that's going to really stop it, and you may find that your plant just doesn't grow at all, or may not turn out to be a good plant. And all you have to do with this is the exact same as what you would do with your flower in the kitchen. And you just put your compost in there, put it over another container, and just shake it. And that will just give you a nice fine soil at the bottom, and all those bits of debris will be left in there. So that's a little tip. Definitely a worthwhile purchase if you plan to do a lot more gardening. They're also really handy. As you can see, I keep all of my little seedlings in another one. It's just a spare one, but it does make it easy to bring it in and out if it needs to get a good water. So you've got your seeds, you've got your compost. What do you put them in? Well, seeds will grow in quite a broad range of places, but it's best to try and do the right thing and plant them up accordingly to the stage that they're at. So whenever you're planting your seeds, you might want to put them in these types of little pots that you can pick up quite easily in a lot of the garden centres or supermarkets. They just break down over time, so what you can actually do is plant your seed in there. You'll get your little bit of growth coming. I think I've got one here, and you can just see just in here a little plant coming. I can then go ahead and plant that into another pot, so I don't actually need to start taking it all out and just let it grow away. Or if you do have some plants that are a little bit sturdier, like these sunflowers, you can just pinch those out. Always make sure that you just try and get a finger underneath just to lift them up, guide them out of the soil a little bit. They may have quite large root systems. If you just pull one out, not only are you risking ruining those leaves, but you're also maybe going to detach the stalk from the roots as well. So a couple of little pointers there. But if you can, you would literally be just taking your seedling as it has grown. That one has a decent root system. Putting a little bit of compost in here, making a decent hole, and planting that down in. Then you don't need to always plant the compost or really push the compost down hard around it, so you don't need to be like really pushing in. Okay, whenever you water that, the compost will naturally come down around that, so that little plant will be perfectly secure. There's lots of other things that you can use as well. You can buy little trays like this, which are great if you're maybe wanting to bring a lot on, and then you can just put a little skewer through the bottom and push it up out whenever it's time to move it on. They're a good idea, but you don't get much use out of them, so they're perfect if you maybe have, if you're wanting, say you're maybe growing tomatoes and they're quite quick and you maybe have a lot of them, then something like that is good. But don't forget, they can't stay in that, so you got to move them on. You'll also get little trays like this, which are good, especially if you've got little ones and you maybe want to grow watercress or something like that. Then that is perfect, because there's a good view, you can see what's going on, and it's easier to get the little seedlings out of those trays. And then of course there's just normal pots, and you can plant any seeds in pots, really. It's, if you've got old pots lying around and you don't want to, you maybe don't want to go out and spend a whole lot of money on all of these various pots to get to that end stage, you can go ahead, and some of the seeds will actually say to plant in a prepared soil bed, and that would be the likes of your pot with a good quality compost. Plant them in there with a fine dusting over the top, which you would be using your sieve for, and leave them. Just make sure that you water them gently, possibly with the mister function on your hose, because if you go ahead and use that like rainfall nozzle, that could be enough to displace all those seeds whenever you water them. So that's another key thing to remember, is how you water, and it's important that you use the right tools or the right hose connector to make sure that you don't disrupt those little seeds once they start to get embedded in the soil. So that is your seeds. All you need to do is to get your pot, and this is all compost that I have already sieved out. So all we're going to do is just fill up, being attacked by a fly. All we need to do is fill that up. I like to use the other pots just to push it down. So you don't need to go and buy a whole lot of different tools, just use what you've got. And although these are for naming your plants, just go right ahead, put that in the centre. But before you do anything else, the next stage is to become aware of what is on your seed pack. Now, these are sunflowers. They can be planted indoor and outdoor, and along the back it'll tell you when you can sow them outdoors, how far apart they need to be, what height they'll come to, and the flowers, when you can expect the flowers, which is July to September. If you want to plant them indoors, it says sow seeds 1 centimetre deep in trays of moist compost. So that would be anything like this or bigger. Or you can do them in pots, no problem, they'll still grow. And then if you want to grow on it, that goes through the process of hardening off. So if you're not familiar with the term hardening off, that would be anybody who brings seeds on inside the house or in a greenhouse. And obviously we live in a climate here that the temperatures can still drop quite considerably in the evening. So you will want to make sure that you bring those out of the greenhouse or out of the house during the day and bring them back in and start to acclimatise them to outside. So that's what they mean whenever they talk about hardening off. Do that, and then they will start, you can leave them outside and they will be absolutely fine. You can of course grow them outside, and it says just to plant them about 0.5 centimetre deep. Okay, so that's literally just on the top of the soil. These don't need to go right down, so don't fall into that trap of going right down in, because that little seed then has to use so much more energy to try and push up through the soil. So all we are going to do is take our seeds, and we only want to take one. And if you want to grow sunflowers, top tip is a pack of sunflowers will cost you nearly £3. You might be able to pick up some sunflowers in the form of birdseed in the likes of one of the shops like Home Bargains or B&M. Sunflowers are sunflowers and they will grow, so be savvy with what you want to grow as well. Take your seed and simply drop it down only a little bit into the soil and just gently cover that over. And that is all there is to planting those seeds. Now, some others will be a little bit more complicated, and some will require you to bring them on and move them out and harden them off and things like that. But if you're wanting to build your confidence, start simple, and when you get the hang of it, then you can easily just start to move on to something or try something else out. The last thing to do is always make sure that you label, because a lot of seedlings can look exactly the same, and there is nothing worse than having trays and trays of seeds and you have no idea what they are, so you won't know how to look after them. So quite simply, my whole tray in front of me here is made up of sunflowers, so I just need to put one end that says sunflower. And that goes the same if you've got, like, if you're planting them in pots, just make sure that you do put that little name tag down the side, write on it what it is, and you'll know exactly how to look after it. So next thing we're going to talk about is taking cuttings. Now, believe it or not, this is very, very simple. But if you're new to gardening, you could think, what on earth do I do and where do I start? Well, taking cuttings is a great skill to have. And what you need to do is just take a little snip off a flower and put it in some water or put it directly in the soil, and you should have a plant. Sounds simple enough, but what plants can we actually take cuttings from? Well, we can't take cuttings from everything, that's the important thing, but we can take cuttings from a broad range of plants. So the best thing to do is Google it. The internet is there to be used. Just, can I take cuttings from a geranium? Yes, you can. And if you have a look just here, I have these geraniums in the back garden, and they are such a lovely shade of pink. Like, this is a real hot pink, so I want to fill all of my baskets with these, and that's what I'm going to do. So we take our cuttings off those, and we can either put them in water or put them directly into soil. And when we do that, after a week or so, we may start to see a little bit of growth, and they should start to set up their own root system, and I will have multiple plants. Now bear in mind that if you do take those cuttings from that plant, your new cuttings will directly resemble that plant, so you're not going to get a different colour, you're going to get the exact same plant. So if you're looking for variation, you probably need to buy a couple of different ones in the shops. But taking cuttings is very, very simple, and there's just a couple of things you will need. A good pair of scissors, and you will either need a glass of water or a pot of moist compost. So this is my jar of cuttings. It's a glass that I've been keeping on the windowsill, thinking I should probably do something about that. I haven't quite got around to it until now. So how do you take a cutting? Okay, well, this is mint growing behind me here, and I'm going to take a cutting from the mint, and what we need to do is cut just below a couple of, or just above a couple of the leaves. So now that you've got your cutting, there's a couple of things you need to do to make sure that this is really going to work for you. So these leaves at the bottom, let's just take those off. And that leaves a good bit of the stalk. So that stalk is going to go into the water. So just take these out. Try to make sure that you have some nice fresh water. Now this water is fresh, it's just got a couple of leaves in it. But pop it on your windowsill and pop your mint into it. Now this mint will grow within a few days. So that is how to take your first cutting. So it's a good to start with the likes of herbs such as mint, because that will build your confidence and it will give you something different to try out. So pop it in there, and what you will find is that you will get, do I have a bit of meat? A bit of mint here. It's a bit that actually broke off in the high winds last week, and you can see the root system that now has in place. It's a huge root system, and what I can do with that is go ahead and plant it, and that's a whole new plant ready to go. And the same here with, I have a few other bits that have, this has a slightly smaller root system, and I also have some rosemary here, which I wasn't sure if it was going to work, and it actually has. So there's another big root system there coming out of that one, and this little one has one little tiny root on it, but that's all I need, and that one has a couple of roots on it as well. So those are all going to make new plants, and they will make new plants just like this and like this. And you know, whenever you've got those on your patio and you come out first thing in the morning and you're just engulfed with that lovely, lovely smell, definitely herbs around your patio are a great idea. And you know, if you want to go for something like lavender, not only does it smell absolutely delightful, but it'll attract all the little bees as well, and that's always nice to watch. And we're obviously wanting to try and protect our pollinators as much as possible. So taking cuttings, nothing much to it. All you have to do is make sure that you do a little bit of research, and that goes for your planting seeds as well. Always do your research. So let's see what we need to do. We need to consider where we are going to plant our seeds. Consider where we want them to go. Do we want them to be on a window ledge? Do we want them to be in a border, in a flower bed, a shady area, a sunny area? Are we prepared to give them the TLC that they need to bring them on? If you know all the answers to those questions, then it's time for you to go out, buy your seeds, buy your compost, and get those trays planted up and watch those lovely little seedlings come to life and get ready to fill your garden with lots and lots of lovely flowers. There's still time if you want to plant some flowers that'll give you lots of lovely brightly coloured blooms for the summer. There's still time to get those in. Don't forget that sometimes whenever we watch the television programmes, especially the likes of Gardener's World, we're a little bit further north, so we have a little bit more time to get those planted compared to the guys down in the south of England. Get them planted now, probably in the next couple of weeks before we hit July. Unbelievable that we are nearly in July. Get those done, and there's still time for you to have those flowers for summer. So that's it for our second class for all of our beginner gardeners out there. Hopefully this has been useful and you've learned something new and you now feel a wee bit more confident going out and buying your seeds, planting them up and taking those cuttings. Don't forget, if it doesn't always go right, it doesn't mean that you're a terrible gardener, you don't know what you're doing and you should give up. It just means that you need to try something different and try again. See you next week for episode 3.